Roots is a 4-year training program for refugees and immigrants who are interested in starting farm businesses in the Kansas City metro area. As mentioned, it exists in the partnership 50-50 between Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas and Cultivate KC. Our offices are in downtown KCK. If you've been Fifth in Minnesota, if you've been to the Catholic Charities building, that's where the office is. We also have a 9-acre training farm about 5 minutes away from there called Juniper Gardens Training Farm, and it's where most of my work occurs. And it's a really special and magical place that I love talking about. So I'm honored, but then also just stoked to talk about it. So Catholic Charities. So I've been with New Roots now for a little over like around 3 years, and I started on the Catholic Charities side. And both organizations bring very unique skill sets to the table. It's been a partnership that's persisted for about 16, just over 16 years now, almost 17. And it's for anyone who's worked in nonprofits or like anything involving partnerships, you know how much of a feat it is to get people to cooperate at all, much less for 16 years. So the reason that is that both organizations bring, again, very specific expertise to the table. Catholic Charities is the resettlement agency for refugees in Northeast Kansas. And so they provide, you know, aside from New Roots is a very small program within their broader suite of services that they, not just for refugees and immigrants, but you know, they provide, you're probably familiar with Turnstiles, which is like sort of the thrift store. They do food distributions, and there's you know, they do various housing programs for unhoused people. But as far as their involvement with New Roots and sort of the assets that they bring to that program, it's their connections with the refugee community. It's their deep list of interpreters and partners who are used to working in culturally competent ways with vulnerable communities. And the program started with Catholic Charities. So about 17 years ago, you had a group of Somali Bantu women who had arrived in the United States and were feeling a little lonely, a little isolated. You know, at this point in the talk, usually if there's kids in the audience, I'll ask, can you imagine moving to a country that didn't have like your favorite food, didn't have the pizza, didn't have the tacos, didn't have, you know, Cheetos, whatever else that, you know, people are eating these days. And that's sort of to communicate that the isolation that the women were feeling was very much not just the linguistic isolation of being in a country where people didn't understand what you're saying, but the cultural isolation, missing the foods from home, right? And so what they approached one of the Catholic Charities coordinators at the time and wanted to get a garden club going. And so excellent idea, pretty easy to implement. And so that first year, it was a hit. The women were able to not only, you know, connect in a meaningful way with each other and then like meet other people in, you know, who shared a common language and cultural history, but they were able to make enough to, you know, sell at markets. So they had a little bit of extra cash, which, you know, for a lot of people coming to the country from that area of the world, especially for women, tends to be a really important thing. But then they were also able to reconnect with those traditional food ways that they, in many ways, had lost, right? Like American grocery stores don't stock uchicha or isogo or, you know, things that they're used to having. So it was a hit that first year, and then Catholic Charities approached Cultivate KC. Catholic Charities not being famous for its agricultural expertise, right? Saying, you know, we don't really know how to do this well in the long term, but can we make something happen here? And Cultivate KC enthusiastically affirmed. So the next year, they signed a lease with the Housing Authority, and Juniper Gardens Training Farm was founded. And we're going to get more into that in a second, I guess. But just to talk a little bit more about the program itself. So the admission process is so historically it's been just for refugees. I think until recently, until last September actually, it was branded as New Roots for Refugees. That's because a lot of our funding comes from the Office of Refugee Resettlement. But since again, like last September, we were able to secure funding mostly through the USDA, so that we didn't have to restrict our programming to people who just had refugee status. So now we're open to anyone with a language barrier. We don't have a lot of requirements for enrolling in the program. Generally, they are like you have to get yourself to the farm. Like you have to have sort of reliable transportation because on weekends or if there's going to be a snap frost, staff can't always be there to like come pick you up and then bring you so you can cover your road with row cover. We do also require like a base level of English. Like almost none of the farmers are fluent in English, but you need to be able to count in English and understand like sort of English number systems because that's part of running a business. And you need agricultural experience, which is probably the most important requirement because farming is pretty hard. Does anyone in the audience have a farm? Okay.
We have a garden.
Does anyone in the audience have a garden? Yeah. So how's it gardening in August? How is that garden looking? Yeah, it can get kind of rough looking, right? So it's agriculture, tending crops in general is very hard work. So it really we want people to be committed to the program to be successful, and so we want you to know what you're getting into. And then sort of there is an element where we do require at least one income in the family outside the farm. Farming is not famous for being very lucrative, right? And so especially in their first year getting going, the farmers will make money, their businesses will be profitable, but they will not make enough to sustain their households. So we say that you generally need, it doesn't have to be a husband and wife pair, but it can be like a brother or it can be a friend or whoever. But you need someone else who can kind of support you while you're getting that business started because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and very little money at first. So in this 4-year training program that we have, it's basically you learn everything you need to know about growing and selling in the Midwest, which is, as you might expect, a little different from growing on the equator, right? So we have pretty intensive educational programming year round. So we are in the thick of English class season right now. We have it is a like industry specific, I used to teach it. That's English for Farming curriculum. And it's basically English classes geared towards interactions with customers and interactions with farm staff. So it's a lot of vocabulary, it's a lot of like very specific conversational training, things like that. But this is also the first interactions the incoming farmers will have with their cohort and then staff. So it's as important as it is to build that base level of English. It's also a way for the relationships to start and that trust to start, which for anyone who works with vulnerable communities, that trust is foundational and the only reason the program works at all. So in my opinion, again, as someone who's taught those classes, that is the biggest part of those classes. Those wrap up right around the end of January, and then in February we start our farm class series, and this is where we get into the farming. Does anyone do any sort of adult education in the audience? College, high school? There you go. So then you like anything that you teach to adults, right? Teaching adults is different from teaching kids, and that the the adults need to see the immediate application of what you're teaching them as is relevant to their lives and their daily experience. And so we try to tie the farm class curriculum as closely as we can to the actual work that will be happening on the farm. And that's why we start in February, because that's generally when we'll start the plants in the greenhouse for the spring. So we'll do some classroom time, and then we'll do a little bit of greenhouse time, kind of applying the things we talked about in the classes. And those run through April, at which point the farm is popping off. There is just all too much going on for classroom work. And so the education, like kind of it transitions from a class-oriented format to more of a one-on-one in the field with our farmer trainer. I should also mention the business classes. So we do, half of farming is the marketing, it's the running a business, finances. And so most of our business classes occur during this time also. But then the field walks begin again in April with a farmer trainer. And then kind of that's just kind of how it is throughout the summer, the growing season, with sort of complementary workshops throughout that are specialized, not really formatted in any specific way. They're more like field trips. We don't do livestock on the farm. And so, we'll plan a workshop at a local like dairy farm because a lot of farmers are interested in cattle. We also do things, again, related to like value-added goods, like ways to diversify revenue streams throughout the year. So we talk about, we do bouquet workshops, we do pickling workshops, things that farmers can do to kind of spread out their business a little bit. Any questions on this before I move on? Think about those questions while I take a drink of water.
About how many incoming freshmen, so to speak, are there each year?
Great question. So, before that's a historically, before the pandemic, I think there were like anywhere between 4 to 6 new incoming farmers in training in a given year, but for various reasons, we've had to reduce that. So now it's like we have like 3 new farmers coming in for next year, and that's how it was for like the last 2 years as well. So we also have I guess related to this, and I'm not sure if it comes up very much later in the presentation. We have a graduate coordinator who in years 3 and 4 of the program works with each farmer to develop a plan for transitioning out of the program, which includes purchasing land or leasing land for them to grow on. And land in Wyandotte County over the last 4 years since COVID has really become, it's still accessible, but it's prohibitive for a lot of our farmers. So we provide the opportunity to lease at the training farm for our graduates as like sort of a bridge while they're like saving up money specifically for land, which means that we take in fewer farmers. So we're currently on the hunt for more land, so that doesn't have to be the case. We're looking to expand into a 10 to 20 acre farm specifically for graduates. So, so we can get into the nitty gritty of the curriculum a little bit for the teachers. So we know about the adult educator. Does there anyone else have any other education experience in the room? Okay. Teaching?
Yeah, for high school years.
There you go. Okay, perfect. So it's a hard thing, teaching. Getting people to be convinced that everything you have to like talk about is worthwhile. And so we try to ground the way that you avoid burnout and people just ducking out in general is by grounding our curriculum development in what the farmers think is relevant to their businesses. So we do end of year evaluations and we do assessments of our own like each year's classes. And we don't reinvent the curriculum every year. There's just kind of a standard base, but we do modify it every year to offer new things that came up. Again, like bouquets were the big thing this year. we like value added again was another thing that came up this year, season extension. So in years, the problem is that we have a pretty limited staff, right? So we do not have like graded classes. Like there's not like a track for first, a track for second, a track for third. Like everyone sort of gets the same class offerings, which is valuable because of the language barrier. We use interpreters in our classes, but some of the principles, some of like the theory behind concepts like no-till or like climate change adaptation do require like multiple exposures to it. So we have a set of classes that we really only require first and second years to go to, and then we have more advanced classes for our third and fourth year farmers and that are also available to graduates. So we do field trips. We do, generally they have to do with, again, going back to those farmer evaluations at the end of the year. We ask, what is something that you wish you learned more about this year? And generally it'll be something like, again, livestock. People really want cattle and goats. People really want to learn more about season extension. How can you grow longer and deeper into the year? So we, Cultivate KC has a broad and deep network of relationships with farms in the metro. And so that allows us to really like answer any of the questions that the farmers have. If you want to learn more about how to grow in December, we'll go to Redfern Farms, is anyone familiar with Redfern? Okay, they have a really excellent winter CSA, if you're interested in that. They grow almost year round. And it's a way that the farmers can see like, oh yeah, this is like, I know it's like 0 degrees outside, but we can still grow kale if you have the right equipment. We also we went to Green Dirt. Are you familiar with Green Dirt? So Green Dirt's a good friend of the program. We go up and check out the sheep every now and again, talk about dairy with the farmers specifically. And they also purchase from us as well, which is great. These are some of our farmers and staff who make it all happen. So to talk a little bit about, well, again, let's see camera here. So on the far left, one of our like bigger field trips, sort of like an annual tradition that farmers are really excited about, and staff. It's a lot of fun. It's called the Emerging Farmers Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we are able to afford for farmers to go up, and it's a conference specifically designed for like non-English speaking emerging farmers. So they have interpretation across the board. They have like culturally relevant foods, and people get to meet like the farmers get to meet like their counterparts from all over the country, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. But this is Tame and Onglet, who are Tame graduated last year, and then Onglet is going to be a third year farmer this year. In the middle of the frame here, we got Craig Howard, who is actually a pretty prominent like microgreens and mushrooms grower in the area. He sells to a lot of areas, and every now and again I'll hit a crowd that like is very familiar with Craig. And it doesn't look like that's the case with this one, but no, totally fine. He's a very cool dude, very intelligent, but he's been so cool, like helping the farmers develop their own markets and relationships with clients. But he specializes in microgreens and mushrooms, which are two other areas that farmers have expressed interest in developing their businesses. And then on the far right, we have Haley Drake, who is our farmer trainer. And she is the individual who's one-on-one with the farmers throughout the growing season on a regular basis, doing the deep education in the field. And then Enoch graduated this year. He's the guy on the right. So graduate support. So this is a big one. So take a gulp of water. So 16 years, right? We're wrapping up our 16th growing season. We have had around 44 families pass the program, and about 34 of them are still growing and selling in the area. And that it's a pretty solid success rate, right? It's something that we're pretty proud of. And I think that a big part of that is the continued engagement after leaving Juniper Gardens. And so we have a graduate support specialist. Her name is Molly Bahrain. She used to work for Giving Grove, which maybe some of you are familiar with. And she basically is the Haley, the farmer trainer for the graduates, in that she provides a lot of the one-on-one interaction. She has sort of biannual site visits to graduate farms to assess sort of needs. She is the person who's like hunting down land for the third and fourth year farmers. She is like everybody. She'll build a high tunnel for you. She'll write a grant for you, whatever you need. So she has built a really good rapport with a lot of the graduate farmers over the years. And yeah, like I said, I think that the biggest part of our success has been being able to keep people connected with the Juniper Gardens Training Farm. It's just where all the resources are. Cultivate KC, there are mini grant opportunities, for example, where, well, I mean, there's a ton of grant opportunities. So specifically for new roots farmers. And I should preface this by saying, basically everything that the graduate support specialist provides, that Juniper Gardens provides, exists for the average English-speaking public, right? But if you don't speak English, it functionally doesn't exist. So we provide that interface. So by keeping them connected with Juniper Gardens and the graduate support specialist, we can ensure that people have money for infrastructure improvements on their farm, for equipment improvements, for market access opportunities, for interpretation opportunities and interfaces with USDA officials. So it's something that we take a lot of pride in, and I don't know, there's just a ton. There's a ton there. Yeah. Also, just trying to keep track of time. I can talk about this forever, so I'm gonna time myself a little bit up. So there are 3 major sales channels. Well, I guess first of all, any questions on any of that before? Yes.
When a new immigrant or refugee appears on the scene, is transportation a problem getting them to this location?
Great question. So we do, as part of at the recruitment and the onboarding, we do require new enrollees to have like reliable transportation. So again, just because like staff's not always available to be able to get you to the farm in case there's something that happens, or that in case everyone has different work schedules and we just can't schedule around it. So people are required to have reliable transportation as part of the program. And that generally means that the folks that we work with are a little bit more established. They've been here anywhere from 3 to 7 years. They have a job. Everyone has purchased a car at some point. And yeah, so yeah.
Since you're open to more than just refugees now, is there any issue with regard to the documentation of your students?
Everyone's documented. That's that's how we've been told to answer that question. And it's true. It is true. I mean, I think it's something that we have obviously now have to take very seriously. And so we don't. It's not a requirement of the program. We don't ask about that because it's none of our business. Everyone comes through Catholic Charities, and so Catholic Charities, as part of their like service, like providing services, they do like the checking everything and checking boxes. But we don't ask. Kind of the same thing with religion. We don't ask about religion. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about your documentation status. But it is something that we are aware of and concerned with. Not because we doubt people's documentation status, but because regardless of like your status as an immigrant, you're now a target, right? When certain laws come through. So it's something that we're definitely coming up with. So, yep.
A couple of times you've mentioned support from USDA, and I'm somewhat familiar with some of the support. I own a little bit of farmland up in South Dakota, this family land that I inherited. And I get all kinds of support from a local NCRS and stuff like that. There's all these FDA acronyms. But there's people just sitting there, but I own land, and the people who work my land own land right next door, and everybody's kind of in this process system, elaborate and crazy stuff, and all kinds of good things happen. If you have an immigrant person who doesn't even own any land yet, what kind of USDA services, if any, are available to them?
Oh, lots. Yeah, because you don't need to own land in order to
Okay.
benefit from FSA or NRCS. And in fact, one of the things we offer graduates is access to EQIP grants through the that's NRCS, that's FSA. And basically an EQIP grant is like a cost match program for like large infrastructure improvements. And so we have a number of farmers who've gotten EQIP grants to build high tunnels or get water installed on land that they're thinking of purchasing, which I guess in that case they do own it, but the point is that they don't actually need to own it. And the FSA, to the documentation question, like you, in order to get a business license, you do need a tax ID. So that's why, yeah, that's why the documentation thing, we're pretty confident in that. But that's all you need. You don't need citizenship or land ownership to benefit from those programs. So, and then did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, what countries primarily are these folks coming from?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, and that will come up later. So Elizabeth and I like collaborated on this presentation and just squished them together. So the slides are a little out of order. That will come up at some point. But generally, so again, because the bulk of our farmers, or the bulk of our existence of the program has been mostly for refugees, probably 70% of our folks are from Burma, refugees from Burma or Myanmar. And then probably 30% are from like Central Africa. So Congo, Burundi, trying to think if there's one, Tanzania. So, and then we have our first farmers from Southern Mexico as well. So, yeah. Questions? Clicking along. So since you asked, we're just talking about, just kidding, you didn't ask. So where do farmers sell produce? So first, there are no expectations for how much money the farmers should be making as like a function of their success in the program. We make sure that we are very concerned that people are profitable because the farmers we work with come from economically precarious communities, and so we would be remiss to be luring people from those communities into poverty, growing for failed businesses. So there's a lot of effort that goes into making sure that businesses are profitable by the end of their 4 years. In year 1 and 2, generally, like I said, they're getting things going. Their client lists aren't built out yet. They'll make probably anywhere between like $2,000 and $5,000 a year out of their quarter-acre plot. And talking about the farm in a later section. But we, towards the end of the 4 years, it's sort of expected, not a requirement, that people are selling between $15,000 and $20,000 worth of produce from just their plot at Juniper. By that time, they're also usually selling or growing on a separate site. And we don't track that. Everything that the farmers sell, they keep as far as the money goes. There's a small sort of fee that Catholic Charities takes from aggregating the CSA, because they do all the work for getting the customers and shipping out the boxes, things like that, just to make it sustainable. But it's like 15%. But everything else is for the farmers. And we, part of our business classes are saying like, this is your income, but this is also an investment in your business for the future. So we set up bank accounts for them, and make sure that they're set for the future. The 3 sales channels through which the farmers sell, you may be familiar with them at the farmers market, because we are farmers market's usually the most visible one, right? So farmers are at pretty much every, except for Overland Park, every farmer's market in the metro.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Surely there is a lot of immigrant farmers at
Mhm.
Northern Park Farmers Market. So you're saying none of them came through this program?
Oh, a lot of them probably did. I think there are like people who are immigrants who did not go through the program, but our farmers sell currently at like most of the farmers markets in the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since you singled out Overland Park.
Oh no, I'd say Overland Park is the one that for whatever reason like that's the one that we don't have one currently. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to get into that this year. But yeah. But literally every like not for any reason against Overland Park. It's just that for this year that was not the case. Most years it is. So farmers market's the big one. We also have a CSA. Are you familiar with CSA? So it's basically a vegetable subscription service. We call it the farm share. And then we also do online retail and like wholesale to restaurants and hotels. So some of the restaurants that buy from us are the Town Company, Fox and Pearl, Simply Grand, Orbino, and Lulu's Thai. So we have some really good support in the community. And to Craig Howard's credit, again, he's done a lot of really good work to expand some of those places, those market access opportunities.
Does the online market ship or do you pick up?
It does not ship. So we have 5 distribution sites throughout the metro that you would go pick up your CSA, and that's also where your like online purchases will be picked up. But basically, so we have and it's not on this presentation, but if you go to the website, it will like you would sign up for like one of the distribution sites. There's one Black and Beach headquarters in OP, 10,000. It used to be 10,000 villages in OP downtown. The Merck and KCK. Not City Hall. There was, for a brief moment, it was City Hall this summer in KCMO. It was like a special thing. And then we have 39th and it's the Plex Pod in Westport. And then I think those are the main. Oh, City Market. What's that? Yeah, City Market. Did you say something? Okay. So then, yeah, you'd go pick them up there. So the reason we're here tonight, I actually assumed that was the case, but I've been told that it's an ecumenical volition. So, so Village Presbyterian has had a really big role in our programming in the last couple of years. So if Cultivate KC, which we're going to talk more about the sustainability side of things in a second, has a mission. It's to grow good food sustainably, but also to make sure that that food is accessible in the communities in which it's grown. And so Juniper Gardens Training Farm is 9 acres of organic produce that's grown in a neighborhood that has not seen a grocery store in decades, right? And so Village Presbyterian has allowed us to sort of bridge that gap. So with a grant that we had in 2023 and 2024, we've been able to purchase food grown by New Roots farmers and distribute it for free in Northeast KCK at different community events. So there is like a community service, like a monthly thing at it's called Leah's on the Queue, which is at 17th and Quindaro. And it's like it's a laundromat that once a month decided to do free laundry day for residents, which is a huge boon. But it's also become a great hub for like KU Med to set up like health appointments with people, for social workers to get hooked up with people. And then that's also where we distribute our food. This year, through Elizabeth's, this is Elizabeth on the right, or at left, sorry. Sorry, she's on this right. Through Elizabeth's outreach, she's been able to develop relationships with the Vernon Multipurpose Center, which is anyone familiar with that one? So it's in Northeast KCK, and it is by like the Quindaro town site ruins, and it is like it's basically a community center, but it's become this like just hub for seniors, and it's like a great place to connect with people who would benefit from some food. And it also, where's the other one? Oh, Blacklark Apartments. So, and we'll talk about the property Juniper Gardens in a second. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. So Blacklark Apartment Complex used to be the oldest public housing in Kansas, and that's where Juniper Gardens is located, like in the middle of it. And so they've recently been purchased by Blacklark. It's it's a developer, and they're Della Lamb as well as Mission Adelante are resettling new families in that housing complex. So as part of like the welcome mission, we've been able to pass out free produce, like culturally relevant produce also, to the new residents. And then Elizabeth has also spent a lot of time at Bertram Carruthers Elementary School this season as well. So these are, and Elizabeth, if she was here, would know way more about all of this stuff that she's been doing. But it looks like she's fed over 168 families. So we, 700 pounds of food, that is a lot of produce, right? Produce does not take up a ton of density. So it's, 700 pounds is a lot. And then I think the sort of the coolest part of the whole thing is that like while we are bridging that fence line to the community that has been historically underserved, the farmers at New Roots are also like making money in the process. So it's been a really neat aspect of our programming that I'm really hoping continues into next year and expands. The last couple of years have been kind of pilots, and it's been wildly successful. Any questions on this at all? Some pictures from Bertram Carruthers. And now we'll hear from Cultivate KC. Before I dive too much into that, talking about Catholic Charities, talking about the sales channels, is there anything else on those subjects? Yeah.
How connected are you with other education, such as Johnson County with the Open Hill Farm and using the students crosswalk?
Mm-hmm. We do a lot with Case, not so much JCCC, but Case State Extension. So the Growing Growers program, which is actually has very similar programming to ours, just for English speakers. We do a lot of resource sharing. They host workshops. WICO State Extension has been like really helpful as well. But we have like a national network of other incubator farms who we also work very closely with in developing plain language learning materials. So we rely on interpreters for almost everything, right? But in situations where we don't have an interpreter present, we need to be able to communicate without that spoken word. And so we rely on something called like plain language, right? And plain language, if anyone's familiar with it, forgive me if I butcher the definition, but it is basically a way to like communicate a single point in the simplest way possible. That's what it sounds like, right? So through Tufts University, we have sort of joined like again this national network of similar incubator farms to develop like a database of materials that we can rely on to talk about everything from how to properly like wash and store and pack produce to pest management while staff aren't on the farm and stuff like that. So we do quite a bit of partnership. Like I said, with K-State, we've done field trips to JCCC for sure. But yeah, we do a lot of education sharing. Okay. So Cultivate KC, as I mentioned, our mission is to grow food, farms, and communities in support of a healthy local food system for all, is like the important part, I think, in that one. So Cultivate KC, New Roots, similar to Catholic Charities, is like one program in a broader offering for the public. We've recently received a fairly large USDA grant, the FSA. We are newly appointed the local FSA cooperators for urban agriculture for Kansas and Missouri. So we are getting real busy, that's for sure. So basically everything that I've talked about with Juniper Gardens so far,
Oh, yeah. What's the relationship between Cultivate KC and KC Community Gardens? Or is it not?
very good. Oh yeah, it's very good. We work with KCCG all the time. We have a grant. We partnered with them last year that we're about to wrap up, I guess in September, for like perennial fruits. So we work with them quite a bit. They helped us plant an educational orchard. And you're familiar with Matt Bunch. Okay, so Matt Bunch runs Giving Grove. And he does workshops with us. And so we're very tight with them. And so they're actually part of like our broader orbit. They handle more of like the community garden side of things, and Cultivate KC is specifically for people starting farms, production farms. So everything I've talked about that Juniper Gardens provides, so technical assistance, grant access, things like that, Cultivate KC provides for the broader community. So we provide for you if you're getting like a farm or like large garden started. We have many grants available. Although it's closed last week for this round, that are $3,000 to $5,000 for if you need a new BCS, or you want to get water, like irrigation extensions, things like that. And then also help applying for EQIP grants. We also have bulk order opportunities. So it's like sort of a cooperative buying system for potatoes and fertilizer and silage tarps and a whole host of things. And that's sort of the role that Cultivate KC has been providing for, again, at least almost 20 years. So it's been a long time. We had a farm in Westport that last year, unfortunately, was discontinued. So we were 5 years into a 25-year lease, and then they decided that they didn't want to use the land for farming anymore. So that's why you own land and not lease it, right? So we are currently on the hunt. Well, no, we have a pretty good idea of where we're going to build the new farm, but that probably won't be until this coming summer, at the end of next summer. We also have a food access team that runs Dot Mobile Grocer, which is like a mobile grocery service in Wyandotte County. So, you have a question?
Yeah, just I think this is a good time to bring this up.
Yeah,
Given what you're
please. Yeah.
there. I've been thinking lately because for changing government, it's going to be challenging for any of us, right? So, how much is local food grown over the last 20 years, and what would it take to expand it like tenfold? So we're big increase.
Yeah.
What's keeping that from happening, or what can we do to make that happen?
It's a good question. And that's something that Cultivate KC is working directly with. So there's a regional food systems project with KC Healthy Kids and like a host of other partners that did like sort of an exploratory project the last few years on that question specifically. So I'll preface that by saying that like since I don't know the exact numbers, but this is something that we've been talking about recently for various reasons. The number of farmers markets, if that's going to be a metric, since like the 90s in Kansas City has exploded. Like there are like dozens more farmers markets than there used to be. But that's not a whole local food system, right? So what would it take? I think like the thing that we're running into right now, and it's something that Cultivate's working on, is like its land access is the big thing. A lot of the municipal zoning codes are not favorable to urban ag. And I think that is going to be the big thing if you want to increase that portion of the local food system. There are also Kansas, like things that have gone well, and you see this in Kansas specifically, is that there's been a lot of state support for like post-harvest supply chain stuff. So it's, there's been a lot of money come down for that we've been able to help our farmers out with for like cold storage and transportation. Problem is also like the processing hubs. I mean, that's a huge question. Like it's big, but basically that's how I would answer it in short. Is like land access is step one, and like land access that is not as restricted by like antiquated codes, basically. Is something that we run into all the time.
Are they building a building on Cultivate farm?
They are. Well, they're rehabbing an old one, so that's where like there's gonna be an education center and offices and things like that. But the farm itself will probably be like a greenhouse and like maybe it's gonna be like an acre educational farm, is my understanding. That's also like a different department of Cultivate, so I'm not super familiar on that specific thing, that topic, but yeah, I'll definitely. Who would be able to answer that is if you talk to me afterwards, I can give you the first advice. So as mentioned, what Cultivate KC brings to the table. So if I'm about to pace, I can't pace, I gotta stay in the camera. So if Catholic Charities brings the interpretation, the cultural competency, the relationships with the immigrant community, the educational expertise, the tax expertise, the sales expertise, what does Cultivate KC bring? And that is ag expertise, right? So not only do we have and run the training farm, we bring the agricultural expertise of farmers who've had, not just decades in the industry, but like generations in the industry. And they work with the Catholic Charities folks to put that know-how into a workable adult curriculum. We have, so Juniper Gardens Training Farm, we have supplies and equipment for everything that the individuals need to get the business started while they're building up their own kits, basically. We have a shared tool library that has everything you need for your first couple of years. We have a shared wash stand, shared cool storage. Shared greenhouse. With lots of stuff. We have production planning, so we work with the farmers individually to create individual production plans that will help them get ready for the next season. That graduation support, like I talked about, it's so critical to the success of the program, are the main things that we sort of provide as an organization. And this is a map that I provided just for you to see. So, downtown DCK, yeah, Minnesota Ave right here, just north of downtown. But this is what it looks like. And this is the part where, again, Elizabeth and I made these slide decks separately and just kind of squished them together. So this is my half. I get credit for all the slides moving forward. So we have 9 acres total. We lease 7 from formerly, we used to lease it from the housing authority, the KCK housing authority. That was now then purchased by Blacklark. So now we lease it from them for very low cost, basically managing 7 acres of land that they would otherwise have to do something with. And then we own about like almost 2 acres across the street. So it's one farm, we own 2 acres, we lease the 7 others. While in the program, the farmers get about 1/4 acre each, and these show roughly the size of the plots. And these are all of the services that I talked about at the beginning. We have a stair-step model for self-sufficiency for these businesses, right? So in their year 1, we basically pay for everything that they would need to get going. We pay for the utilities, pay for their seeds, we give them beyond what can be shared. We give them personal tools to get started with, pay for market fees. But utilities tends to be the big one. So this is their first year water. Actually, truly for all the farmers who grow there, it's a subsidized water bill. In their 3rd and 4th years, they pay the full water bill, but their full water bill is still probably like 70% of what the UG actually or BPU charges. This is the question about the farmers. So this is picture from, actually, unfortunately, it's like last year, so it's not super updated. But we have 10 farmer families in training. We have 46 farm kids running around, which is wild. I mean, it's a lot of kids. And we have 6 grads on site, 17 community gardeners. We do have a portion of the land dedicated to community gardeners. Generally, they are either families of the farmers or other individuals from the refugee community who don't want to be in the program, don't want to sell produce, but they want to grow for their families. Which the Somali women who I talked about in the beginning are part of that. They own land, actually just down the block from us, but they also contribute to the community garden. As mentioned, Congo and Burma tend to be the bigger groups. We've also had folks from Syria and Nepal and Burundi, some different places. And then we have 7 languages spoken on site. How are we doing on time? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I mean, it's a little after 8, so,
How long was it? Just 8 was the time limit?
no, I mean, we can go probably 15 more minutes.
Okay.
Or 10, 15.
We've already talked about this. This is just the cycle of the year. But, again, we're right in the middle of class season, meeting with people to talk about their sales and income taxes, things like that. I want to have time for questions at the end also. I think that's more important. But this is what you're here for, right? So the environmental impacts of urban ag are something that, my background's in environmental studies, right? Environmental sociology is kind of how I talk about it. And the environmental impacts of urban ag are significant. They can be complicated, but also a really important way, if we're talking about density, if we're talking about building more sustainable cities, talking about more integrated food systems, more humane food systems, urban ag has to be part of it, right? So beyond the reducing the food miles, right? I mean, it's not traveling 400 miles. You're not getting a bunch of flowers from 400 miles away, or getting your onions, your scallions. That food's grown in downtown KCK organically. It protects open space, which especially for places like Northeast KCK, which tend to be pretty dense and blighted, right? Like it lacks open green space that is friendly. It increases biodiversity, especially with certain integrated pest management strategies. We develop a lot of really excellent wildlife habitat on the farm intentionally as part of our way to manage biologically pests and things like that. But it also is really critical, especially for communities like Northeast KCK, in reducing that urban heat island effect. You guys familiar with that one? All right. So prior to my role with New Roots, I was working with a different organization, the UG, looking at policy around climate adaptation and problems with historic disinvestment and policy failures and how to change them with UG around urban heat island effect specifically. And urban agriculture is, you can do parks, you can plant trees, all these things are fine and good and great. But urban ag, in my opinion, is the most versatile use of land that does that. It reduces the urban heat island effect. It preserves open space. It produces food. It's a biodiverse habitat. The UG or KCK in particular has a really bad problem with stormwater runoff. Like, it not only diverts the runoff, but it uses it and turns it into something useful. So the environmental impacts of urban agriculture are pretty big. The scale, right, is something that we really need to work on, and that relies on developing better systems for food storage and processing and distribution. But the will is there. We personally, as a program, have 44 graduates who are out there urban farming right now. But we could do better.
Is that the case though? Like, does it specifically, is urban ag you're talking about that is this beneficial, specifically have to be, organic and using integrated pest management? And I mean, you can't just go in with big ag and in the urban core and have the same benefits? Could you?
That's a great question. And that's why I bring up the social impact, right? So in my analysis, right, urban ag really implies the social benefit of the people around it. And if it does not do that, then you're just, I mean, I guess you would have to call it urban ag, right? But it's not really it's the benefits are not like outweighing the negatives, right? Because there's a need for housing, right? There's inevitable competition for land in a city. It's a dense space. That makes sense. So if you're not taking in the social impact of what you're doing by making sure that it's not polluting the air, the land, the water around you, then, you know, you could be doing better. We'll see that. And so the social impact is something I think is integrally tied to the environmental impact. You cannot have a good social impact. You cannot have good urban ag without good social impact. You can't have good social impact without a good environmental impact.
Let me just add a comment. Conventional ag isn't designed to people at all. It's designed to put one man on a John Deere tractor and have him plant acres and acres and acres and acres and acres. Do all kinds of, just tremendous amount of work with equipment. And then kill stuff with chemicals, which totally, theoretically, is going to eliminate the need for human hands to care for anything. And no concern for exposure of individual, there's no people there. So if they have glyphosate like crazy in clouds, on that day, there's nobody, tractor's gone. It just, the whole lot of the big USDA, big ag stuff, I just don't see how you would fit in an urban setting in small plots.
Which is why it's hard to scale, right? Like on an open market. And that's why we focus on the crops that we do focus on, is we focus on things that can't be easily mechanized, right? And so if we could, it's hard to compete like on an open market. And that's also where we found our niche. Like you focus on building those community neighborhoods, building the local markets out. It's not just growing the food, like developing the places to sell it as well is a huge part of it. But yeah.
Is there any attempt to lobby the new farm bill to shake hands with urban ag?
Yeah, well, definitely. The short answer.
I mean, is it going to be effective? Is it getting anywhere?
And that's the other question, right?
You'll be locked in for 5 years.
Yeah, right. That's yeah. We have a policy director who works with. Have you heard of NSAC? It's a group. It's a policy group specifically that work for urban ag that works and lobbies on the farm bill. So we are actively doing that. Urban ag was written into the 2018 farm bill, and so we are just seeing money come down from that, which is pretty sweet. Well, a couple of years ago is when that was actually implemented, but FSA is finally like getting under.
Do you expect that might be increased somewhat?
I mean, with the new administration, it's hard to say.
What's that?
With the new administration,
rather than taking away, might there be an increase?
Yeah,
If it looks like it's being successful.
I have no idea. I would hope so, right? It's kind of a lot of uncertainty with the new administration, unfortunately. I would hope so, right? I think it has been successful, especially at working in neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested. So, I mean, see, I just don't know. A lot of uncertainty.
Have the Kansas senators expressed any support for this?
No, not really.
They're from Western Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert Marshall did come out to the farm. I don't think he knew what kind of farm it was, but he did come out. And we were grateful for his visit. But yeah, no one has specifically reached out to us or mentioned anything that I'm aware of, at least.
No champions in Congress.
There are. Sharice Davids is phenomenal. She's come to the farm a lot, and I've interacted with her a lot. And she's, I mentioned earlier the Kansas state money that for post-harvest supply chain. She's been doing a lot of really good work helping us get that money. She's responsible for that. So Shrews Davis has been excellent for sure.